Han Seo-rin, a struggling delivery rider working through a torrential Seoul monsoon to pay off her brother's medical debts, collapses from exhaustion and a hidden injury at the feet of Kang Tae-jin, the cold-blooded head of the Kang Syndicate. Instead of begging for a hospital, which would alert the authorities to the illegal debt collectors chasing her, she thrusts her arm toward him, revealing a phone number scrawled in permanent marker. Tae-jin, intrigued by her refusal to involve the law and her strange connection to the number, which belongs to a legendary fixer he once knew, takes her into his private estate. As she recovers, Seo-rin becomes an accidental witness to the softer, lonely side of a man the world fears. Their bond deepens as Tae-jin protects her from the shadows of her past, while Seo-rin teaches the boss that some things, like loyalty and sacrifice, can't be bought. The story culminates in a high-stakes standoff where Tae-jin must choose between his empire and the girl who fell at his feet. The rain didn't stop. It slammed against the roof of the heavy black sedan like 1,000 tiny hammers. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of expensive leather and the sharp, metallic tang of blood. Kang Tae-jin sat perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the girl slumped against the door. His men stood outside in the downpour, waiting for the order to clean up the mess. Usually, a stranger collapsing at the boss's feet was considered a threat to be removed. But Tae-jin couldn't stop looking at her arm. The ink of the phone number was starting to bleed into her skin, but he recognized the handwriting. It was a script from a man he hadn't seen in 10 years, a man he thought was dead. "Sir," his driver, Min-ho, whispered, his hand hovering near his holster. "The docks are only 10 minutes away. We can leave her there. The tide will take care of the rest." Tae-jin's jaw tightened. He looked at Seo-rin's face. She looked so small in her oversized delivery vest, her pale skin almost blue from the cold. Her fingers were still curled into a tight fist, clutching the fabric of his pants even in her faint. She wasn't begging for her life, she was demanding a chance to survive. "No," Tae-jin said, his voice deep and final. "We aren't going to the docks." Min-ho blinked in surprise. "Then, the hospital?" "If she goes to a hospital, the people chasing her will find her before the doctors do," Tae-jin replied. He reached out and gently uncurled her frozen fingers from his suit. Her skin felt like ice. "Take us home. Call the private doctor. Tell him to meet us at the estate in 20 minutes. The driver hesitated. Bringing a complete stranger, especially a weekly delivered girl, into the boss's private residence was a massive breach of protocol. It was dangerous. It was unheard of. "Now, Min-ho," Tae-jin barked. The engine roared to life. As the car sped through the neon-lit streets of Seoul, Tae-jin did something he never did. He took off his dry, silk suit jacket and draped it over the shivering girl. She groaned softly, leaning her head unconsciously against his shoulder. Tae-jin stared out the window at the blurred city lights. He was a man who lived by logic and cold rules, yet he had just invited chaos into his home. He looked down at the mysterious number on her arm one more time. He didn't know who this girl was, but for the first time in years, the cold stone in his chest felt a strange flicker of heat. He had saved her from the rain, but he had no idea that his own world was about to be washed away. The heavy iron gates of the estate swung shut, locking out the noise of the city. Tae-jin carried the girl inside, her weight nearly nothing against his chest. He placed her in a guest room where the bedsheets were white and crisp. After the private doctor finished bandaging a deep cut on her side and left the room, Tae-jin sat in a velvet chair by the window. He stared at his arm. The ink was smeared, but the digits were clear. With a steady hand, he pulled his phone from his pocket and dialed. His heart hammered against his ribs, a feeling he hadn't felt since he was a young boy. The phone rang once, twice, and then a click signaled the connection. "I told you never to call this line unless the world was ending," a gravelly, tired voice answered. Tae-jin froze. He knew that voice. It belonged to Han Seo-rin, the man who had taught Tae-jin everything about loyalty before disappearing into the shadows years ago. Seo-rin was the only father figure Tae-jin had ever known. "Old man?" Tae-jin whispered, his voice cracking. There was a long silence on the other end. "Tae-jin? How did you get this number?" I buried it 10 years ago. Tae-jin looked over at the girl. Her dark hair was fanned out across the pillow, and her breathing was finally steady. A girl. A delivery rider. She collapsed at my feet in the rain. She has this number written on her skin in permanent marker. She told me not to call an ambulance, only to call this. He heard a sharp gasp of breath from the phone, followed by a sound that was half sob and half chuckle. Seo-rin, the old man whispered. My daughter. She found you. I told her that if the sky ever fell on her head, there was only one man in Seoul who was strong enough to hold it up. Tae-jin felt a rush of cold air in his lungs. This wasn't just a random stranger. This was the daughter of the man who had saved his life a dozen times. She was the little flower Gyu-won used to talk about in the old days, the one he had gone into hiding to protect. She's in trouble, Tae-jin, Gyu-won's voice turned urgent and sharp. Men are coming for her because of what I know. If she's with you, they'll come for you, too. You should throw her out if you want to stay safe. Tae-jin stood up and walked to the side of the bed. He looked down at Seo-rin's stubborn, pale face. He thought about his rules and his safety, and then he thought about the man who had raised him. Let them come, Tae-jin said firmly. He reached out and tucked a stray lock of hair behind Seo-rin's ear. The rain has stopped, Gyu-won. She isn't going anywhere. The sun was just beginning to peek through the heavy velvet curtains when Seo-rin finally opened her eyes. For a moment, she forgot the rain and the blood. The ceiling above her was high and decorated with beautiful gold patterns, and the bed beneath her was so soft it felt like a cloud. It was a world away from the cramped, leaky apartment she shared with her brother. Then, the memory of the black sedan hit her like a physical blow. She bolted upright, wasting as a sharp pain flared in her side. Her hand flew to her waist, finding soft bandages beneath a clean, oversized silk shirt that wasn't hers. Fear surged through her. She scrambled backward, her heels digging into the expensive mattress, until her back hit the headboard. I wouldn't move so fast if I were you, a deep voice said from the corner of the room. Seo-rin flinched and looked toward the shadow. Kang Tae-jin was sitting there, his long legs crossed, watching her with eyes that were as sharp as glass. He had traded his suit jacket for a simple black sweater, but he still looked like a king sitting on a throne. He hadn't moved a muscle, but his presence filled the entire room. Where am I? Seo-rin asked. Her voice was thin and shaky, but she tried to make it sound brave. She looked around for a weapon, her eyes landing on a heavy glass vase on the nightstand. You are in my home, Tae-jin said calmly. And you are safe. For now. I don't need a home. I need my bike, she snapped, pushing the blankets off her legs. Her knees trembled, but she forced herself to sit on the edge of the bed. I have deliveries to finish. If I'm late, I don't get paid. If I don't get paid. If you go out there now, you'll be dead before you reach the end of the street, Tae-jin interrupted. He stood up slowly and walked toward her. Seo-rin grabbed the vase, her knuckles turning white. Tae-jin stopped a few feet away, his expression unreadable. He didn't look angry that she was threatening him, he looked almost impressed. You have your father's temper, he said gently. Seo-rin froze, the vase trembling in her hand. How do you know about my father? Tae-jin stepped into the light, letting her see the intensity in his gaze. I called the number, Seo-rin. I know exactly who you are. And I know the people who did this to you. He pointed to the bandage on her side. Put the vase down. You're in a lion's den, it's true. But I'm the only lion who isn't trying to eat you. Seo-rin slowly lowered the glass, but she didn't let go. She looked at this powerful, dangerous man and felt a strange shiver. She had spent her whole life running, but for the first time, she felt like she had run into someone who could actually make the rest of the world stop. Seo-rin finally lets go of the vase. It clattered onto the table with a dull thud. She wrapped her arms around herself, feeling small in the giant room. Tae-jin sat at the end of the bed, keeping a respectful distance, but his eyes never left hers. He waited for her to speak, his silence acting like a bridge she had to cross. It wasn't just a delivery, Seo-rin whispered, her voice cracking. My brother, he's sick. The hospital bills were more than we could ever earn. I went to the wrong people for a loan. Taejin's face darkened. He knew the names of those wrong people. They were the bottom feeders of the city, men who traded in pain and interest rates. They didn't just want the money back, she continued, her eyes filling with tears she refused to let fall. They wanted me to carry a package. They said if I delivered it, my debt would be gone. But when I got to the drop-off, I saw what was inside. It was a setup. They weren't trying to pay me, they were trying to frame me for a crime I didn't commit. When I tried to run, one of them pulled a knife. Taejin stood up, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the floor. He realized now that the clumsy fell at his feet hadn't been an accident at all. Seo-rin hadn't been a messy worker, she had been a target. She had used her bike to weave through the narrowest alleys of Seoul, driving like a professional racer to lose the hitman on her tail. She had crashed into her world because it was the only shield she could find. The man on the bike behind you, Taejin said, his voice low and dangerous. He wasn't a collector. He was a specialist. Seo-rin nodded, a single tear finally sliding down her cheek. He followed me for 6 blocks. I crashed because I was bleeding out and the rain made the turns impossible. I saw your car, the expensive plates, the guards. I knew if I died there, at least someone powerful would see it happen. I didn't know you knew my father. I just wanted to survive. Taejin felt a strange pull in his chest, a mix of anger at the men who hurt her and a deep respect for her bravery. She had faced a professional killer with nothing but a scooter and a permanent marker. You did more than survive, Seo-rin, Taejin said. He walked to the window and looked out at the city. You brought the war to my doorstep. And in my world, we don't pay debts with money. We pay them with loyalty. He turned back to her, his sharp features softening just a fraction. Your debt to those men is over. From now on, you will only answer me. The afternoon sun began to fade, casting long, orange shadows across the guest room. Seo-rin sat on the edge of the bed, her shoulders hunched. The silence of the mansion was heavy, making every tick of the wall clock sound like a heartbeat. The door creaked open, and Taejin walked in. This time, he wasn't carrying a weapon or a phone. He was carrying a small silver tray with fresh bandages, a bowl of warm water, and a soft cloth. Seo-rin tried to stand up, her face turning red. You don't have to do that. I can do it myself. I'm just a delivery girl, I'm used to scrapes. Taejin didn't listen. He pulled up a small wooden stool and sat at her feet. Sit still, he commanded, though his voice was much softer than before. You've spent your whole life taking care of others. Let someone take care of you for 5 minutes. He dipped the cloth into the warm water. His hands were large and scarred, the hands of a man who had fought his way to the top of a dark world. But as he touched the skin around her wound, he was incredibly gentle. He wiped away the dried blood with a steady rhythm. Seo-rin held her breath. Up close, the Mafia Boss didn't look like a monster. He looked tired. He looked like a man who carried a weight even heavier than hers. Why are you doing this? She whispered. My father is gone. You don't owe me anything anymore. Taejin paused, his thumb brushing against the edge of her bandage. He didn't look up. In my life, everyone wants something from me. My men want power. My enemies want my head. But you. He finally looked into her eyes. You just wanted to live. You reminded me of someone I used to be before the world turned me into this. For a moment, the cold boss persona vanished. He wasn't the head of a syndicate, he was just a man looking at a girl who had survived the same rain he had. He reached out and tucked a stray hair behind her ear. His touch was warm, and for the first time in years, Seo-rin didn't feel like she had to run. He finished wrapping the new bandage and stood up, clearing his throat as if he were embarrassed by his own kindness. He walked toward the balcony and picked up a large black umbrella leaning against the wall. The clouds are coming back, he said, looking out at the gray sky. He opened the umbrella over the balcony, as if he were shielding the entire world from the coming storm. Rest, Seo-rin. As long as you are under my roof, the rain can't touch you. As he left the room, Seo-rin looked at her bandaged side. The pain was still there, but for the first time, the fear was starting to fade. The peace of the mansion shattered at midnight. A loud explosion rocked the front gates, followed by the screeching of tires and the sharp pop-pop-pop of gunfire. Seo-rin jumped out of bed, her heart hammering against her ribs. She didn't have to guess what was happening. The man who had chased her through the rain had finally found where she was hiding. Tae-jin burst into her room, his eyes dark with fury. He wasn't the gentle man from the afternoon anymore, he was a soldier. He handed her a helmet and a pair of keys. The back entrance is clear, but they blocked the main road with SUVs, he said, his voice tight. My men are holding them off, but more are coming. I need to get to my secondary base to end this, but my driver is down. I'll drive, Seo-rin said, grabbing the helmet. They ran to the garage, where her delivery bike sat among a row of shiny sports cars. It looked small and battered, but it was fast. Tae-jin hopped on the back, his heavy weight making the bike sink slightly. He held a sleek black pistol in one hand, while his other arm wrapped firmly around her waist. Go, he shouted. Seo-rin kicked the engine to life and roared out of the side exit. They flew into the narrow service alley just as a silver SUV lurched forward to block them. Seo-rin didn't brake. She leaned the bike so low her knee almost touched the ground, sliding under the gap of a half-closed construction gate. Suddenly, a gunman appeared on a balcony above them, aiming directly at Tae-jin's head. Duck! Seo-rin screamed. She yanked the handlebars, popping a wheelie that sent the bike jumping over a pile of bricks. The movement was so sudden and jerky that the gunman's shot missed, hitting a metal pipe instead. Tae-jin seized the moment, firing back with perfect aim and knocking the attacker down. They sped through the winding streets of the neighborhood. Seo-rin drove like a shadow, using every trick she had learned as a delivery rider. She zipped through gaps between cars that were only inches wide and took a flight of stone stairs as if it were a flat road. Tae-jin looked over his shoulder, seeing their pursuers falling further and further behind, unable to follow the small bike through the tight shortcuts. For a moment, as they leaned into a sharp turn together, the danger felt distant. Tae-jin tightened his grip on her, realizing that this fragile girl was the only reason he was still breathing. She wasn't just a victim he had rescued anymore. She was his partner. Left at the next light. Tae-jin called out over the wind. Seo-rin nodded, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. She had spent her life delivering food and packages, but tonight, she was delivering the most powerful man in Seoul to safety. The bike screeched to a halt inside the hidden concrete warehouse that served as Tae-jin's secondary base. The engine ticked as it cooled, the only sound in the sudden silence. Seo-rin pulled off her helmet, her hair damp with sweat and her hands still shaking from the adrenaline. Tae-jin climbed off the back, his face hard and set like stone. He didn't look at his wounds or his torn suit. He looked at the phone in his hand. You saved me tonight, he said, his voice echoing off the high walls. They didn't just attack a mafia boss. They attacked a guest in my home. They attacked the daughter of the man who raised me. Tae-jin, please, Seo-rin whispered, stepping toward him. You don't have to do this. I can just disappear. If I leave, the trouble will be with me. Tae-jin turned to her, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of the cold, legendary fire that made men tremble at the mention of his name. No more running, Seo-rin. If you run, they will chase you forever. They will find your brother. They will find your father. He stepped closer, his shadow stretching across the floor. I am going to wipe out your debt tonight. Every cent. Every drop of blood they think you owe. He picked up the radio on the desk and gave a single, chilling command to his entire organization. Every street, every alley, every basement belongs to the loan sharks. Bring them down. No deals. No mercy. Minho, his driver who had arrived in a separate car, stepped forward. Sir, if we do this, it breaks the peace treaty with the other families. The council will see this as an act of war. They will all turn against us. Then let them turn, Tae-jin snapped. I've spent my life following their rules, and it only brought me a cold house and a lonely heart. Tonight, I'm going on my own. Seo-rin watched him, her heart heavy with a mix of fear and wonder. She had never had anyone stand up for her like this. Most people looked through her as if she were invisible, just a girl on a bike delivering their dinner. But Tae-jin saw her. He was willing to burn his entire world down just to make sure the rain never touched her again. As the sirens began to wail in the distance and his men armed themselves for the coming battle, Tae-jin walked back to Seo-rin. He handed her a small, gold-plated burner phone. "Keep this with you. My men are already at the hospital protecting your brother. The war starts now, but for you, the running is over." The air outside grew cold as the first shots of a much larger conflict rang out across Seoul. Tae-jin walked toward the door, leaving the safety of the shadows to face the storm he had created. The warehouse was buzzing with activity as Tae-jin's men prepared for the final strike. In the center of the chaos, Min-ho approached Seo-rin with a small backpack and a thick envelope with cash. He pointed toward a nondescript car because waiting by the back exit. "There is a boat waiting at the harbor," Min-ho said, his voice low so the others wouldn't hear. "The boss arranged it. It will take you and your brother far away from Seoul. By tomorrow morning, you could be in a place where no one knows your name or your debts. It's the clean start you've always wanted." Seo-rin looked at the bag, then toward the car. This was her dream. No more hiding from loan sharks, no more shivering in the rain on a broken scooter, and most importantly, safety for her brother. She looked across the room and saw Tae-jin. He was putting on a bulletproof vest, his face tight with the weight of the war he had started for her. He didn't look like a boss right now, he looked like a man who knew he might not come back. He caught her eye and gave a small, sad nod. He was giving her the one thing no one else ever had, a choice. He wasn't forcing her to stay in his violent world. He was opening the cage and telling her to fly. Seo-rin took a step toward the car, but then she stopped. She remembered the way Tae-jin had looked at her while he bandaged her side. She remembered the warmth of his jacket on her shoulders in the back of the sedan. If she left now, she would be safe, but she would be leaving the only person who had ever truly seen her. "I'm not going," Seo-rin said, her voice growing louder. Min-ho blinked. "You don't understand. If the council wins tonight, anyone associated with the boss is dead. This is your only chance to live." Seo-rin handed the bag back to him. She walked through the crowd of armed men until she was standing right in front of Tae-jin. He froze, his hands midway through tightening a strap. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice cracking. "The car is waiting." "I spent my whole life running away from things that scared me," Seo-rin said, reaching out to touch his arm. "But you didn't run when I fell at your feet. You stayed. You held the umbrella." She looked at him dead in the eye, her soft features turning as hard as his. "I'm not a package to be delivered to safety. I'm staying here. With you." Tae-jin stared at her for a long time. He saw the stubborn fire in his eyes and realized he couldn't change his mind. He didn't smile, but the tension in his shoulders dropped. He reached out and gripped her hand, his fingers locking with hers. "Then stay close," he whispered. "The storm is here." The sun rose over Seoul, but it didn't look like the city Seo-rin remembered. The neon lights were dim, and the streets were quiet after the long, violent night. The war was over. The men who had chased her were gone, and the council that had ruled from the shadows had been broken. In the center of the warehouse, amidst the empty shell casings and tired men, Tae-jin stood alone, staring at the horizon. He looked different. He had survived the battle, but the heavy weight of being the boss seemed to have vanished. He turned as Seo-rin walked toward him, her steps slowly but steady. She still wore her oversized jacket, a shield that had finally done her job. "It's done," Tae-jin said, his voice raspy and soft. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, silver pin, the symbol of his rank in the syndicate. He looked at it for a moment before dropping it onto the cold concrete floor. "I gave them everything. The money, the territories, the power. I told them I was finished." Seo-rin gasped softly. You gave up your throne? For what? Taejin stepped closer, the early morning light catching the tired lines around his eyes. For a life where I don't have to look over my shoulder. For a life where the only person I have to protect is you. He reached out and took her hand, his thumb tracing the skin of her forearm. The old phone number, the one she had scrawled in a moment of life or death panic, was mostly faded now. The skin was clean, but the memory of that night remained. Taejin pulled a pen from his pocket, not a permanent marker this time, but a simple pen. Kindly, he wrote 10 new digits across her skin. This is my personal number, he whispered. No fixers. No mentors. Just me. If you ever need me, for any reason at all, you call this. Seo-rin looked down at the numbers. They weren't a secret code or a cry for help, they were a promise. She looked back up at the man who had traded an empire for a chance to walk beside her. She realized then that the final delivery wasn't a package or a person, it was her own heart, finally finding a place where it belonged. I don't need to call, Seo-rin said, a small, genuine smile finally breaking across her face. Because I'm not going anywhere. Taejin smiled back, a real, human smile that reached his eyes. He picked up his umbrella, not to hide from a storm, but to walk with her into the morning light. Side by side, the delivery girl and the man who used to be a king walked out of the shadows and into a brand new day.